Hello. Good morning, everybody. On behalf of the Bullis Signature Program, I'd like to welcome you all to session 5. Again, welcome to session 5 of the Signature Programs Symposium. My name is Mark Walter. We're so glad you're here to watch these presentations. If you missed one of the sessions, please know that we'll make all the recording links available shortly after the symposium is over. So keep an eye out for that. Bullis Capstone students are a self-selected group of seniors who've completed additional requirements and have chosen to take on the challenge of pursuing a year-long capstone project based on their own passions and interests in one of our 4 signature programs. These include entrepreneurship, humanities and global studies, visual and performing arts, and science, technology, engineering, and math. The capstone experience is unique because in addition to having a compelling and complete finished product, we ultimately value and celebrate the process. Learning occurs as a journey through researching, interviewing, testing, refining, and rehearsing. Our students have worked hard all year to realize their projects. What you're about to see today is only a brief summary of their accomplishments over the course of the school year. So we hope you enjoy watching and listening and perhaps learning a little something along the way. So our first presentation is a visual and performing arts project presented to you by Jacob Sanders.
Hi, my name is Jacob Sanders, and welcome to my symposium presentation for my VPA Capstone project, A Scenic Design for Fury. In my presentation, I will tell you about my design process for my project, as well as where you can view my project in its entirety. My project description. For my capstone project, I wanted to create a scenic design for a war movie or story. Through my project, I hope to mix my passion for history with my experience in technical theater over the years here at Bullis. The movie I chose was Fury, a 2014 film about an American tank crew in World War II, starring Brad Pitt, John Bernthal, Shia LaBeouf, and Michael Pena. My goal in this project was to draft, budget, and fully construct a section of my design for the auditorium here at Bullis. Research and understanding. I treated this project similarly to past scenic design projects I've done at Bullis. That process includes gathering photos, drafting plans and a budget, and finally, construction. I researched and gathered photos from several shows. 2 in particular, however, were a big inspiration for me, Warhorse and Anastasia. From Warhorse, I looked at how to handle large set pieces like tanks and possible ways to create sight lines for the audience to see the actors. From Anastasia, I looked at their use of screens and projections to create different locations while also using a constant scenic element. After I finished my research, I began brainstorming on what design would fit the show the best. My first design, seen in the top right, was a bit too inspired by Anastasia, with screens sitting in between a Brandenburg Gate-inspired row of columns. I then switched to a more minimalist design, drafts of which you can see in the middle and bottom right. The tank would be the main set piece and made larger, with holes in the tank to allow the audience to see the actors. I settled on using 7 screen walls that would sit behind the tank and display different locations, allowing a larger amount of flexibility than a traditional set design. My final product. Around this time during my project, I was informed that due to COVID-19 restrictions, I would be unable to build my set design. So I decided to instead make something I could on my own, without relying on the school facilities, a foam model. Instead of making a partial set out of wooden screws, I made a full scenic design out of foam in 1-inch scale, larger than I've ever made before and twice as large as the normal set models we make here at Bullis. As I mentioned before, my project had to be downsized because of COVID restrictions. So I decided to supplement my model with some more design work. I created 3 different looks for my design using lighting instruments in the shop, each based off of a different scene from Fury. In addition, I also added a page to my website containing the historical background for the numerous Sherman tanks seen in Fury. If you're interested in my scenic design or Fury itself or the historical background on both, I would recommend you go to my website. You can see the link there. It's furycapstonedesign.weebly.com. It can also be found on the symposium program document, which should be shared with you all. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jacob, and I'm ready for questions.
Hi, Jacob. That was a really good presentation. And I like how you're able to adapt to your problems. So my question to you is, what was the most valuable skill you learned through your Capstone project this year?
Thank you, Will. This project was the first time I've had this much control over a scenic or lighting design. So learning to have confidence in myself as a designer was very important for me this year. Learning to act on my own and having confidence in my artistic decisions was a very new experience for me. So I'm glad to have improved on that this year.
Hey, Jacob. So I am curious, what skills are, because you're not going into scenic design as, a profession, but what skills were you able to develop throughout this capstone that you could carry over into your professional career in college?
So in the future, I plan to be a historian. So I guess some skills I learned, Fury as a show being about World War II and trying to stay as accurate as possible while also having it accessible enough for people to still learn, from the show and also from my website. Because ultimately my goal was, yes, to make a scenic design, but I also really wanted people to learn from it. And being able to learn from my website was really important for me. So trying to walk the line between, do I make it, all the details as specific as possible, or do I have it be more accessible for everyone?
I think that's brilliant. Thank you. And then my other question, why Fury? Why did you choose Fury? This is not a it's not a theatrical show. So why Fury?
I've seen, there are lots of war movies I've watched, but I felt this one was the most unique to me. It focuses on a very small group of people, whereas something like Saving Private Ryan, yes, is like a group of people, but they go all throughout Europe. They go to D-Day in these huge events. So for me, Fury is a much more focused show with a much more, or movie. I made it into a show with a much more focused message about war and what it does to people.
Great. Thanks, Jacob. Good job.
Thank you.
Well, that was wonderful, and we hope that you're beginning to see the interdisciplinary nature of some of our capstone projects. We now have a Humanities and Global Studies project brought to you by Nora Rosario.
Hello everyone, my name is Nora Rosario, and my Humanities and Global Studies capstone topic is maternal health, exploring ways to protect mothers. In 2017, 810 women died every day from preventable complications related to pregnancy and childbirth. For my project, I focused on two key regions, South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, who represent the world's highest maternal mortality rates. I also focused on the US. The US has the highest maternal mortality rate of any developed country. Outcomes for Black and Indigenous women. For the focus of my US part of my project, I explored why outcomes are so poor for Black and Indigenous women. Lack of investment in Black and Indigenous communities, especially for Indigenous communities, lack of local health care and no way to reach medical professionals contributes to the lack of investment and overall poor outcomes for Indigenous communities. Systemic racism within the medical system. Indigenous women and Black women are two of the most oppressed groups in our society. Black women do not seek out care over fear of discrimination. A study found that 30% of Black women reported having been discriminated against during a medical visit. Historic lack of value for Black and Indigenous women. If we do not value Black and Indigenous women, they will not receive the care they deserve. I also want to acknowledge these are very simple explanations to an incredibly complex question. There are many levels that go into addressing the maternal mortality crisis in this country. Mortality globally. South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, the world's poorest regions, suffer from the highest maternal mortality rates. In 2017, of the 295,000 women who died during following pregnancy and childbirth, the majority of their deaths could have been prevented. Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia together represent 86% of the global maternal deaths. Factors include poverty, distance to facilities, lack of information, inadequate or poor quality services. Globally, poor communities with high maternal mortality rates have components like poor hygiene, with lack of essentials like running water or clean water and sanitation units. Another factor is cultural beliefs and practices, hesitation in terms of medical intervention or receiving care from non-community members. This was a topic I was already familiar with, and I knew I wanted to do a project centered around global health, but also an issue that was relevant to the United States. I discovered the United Nations Global Rules for Sustainable Development, Goal 3, Good Health and Well-Being, Target 3.1, by 2030 reduce the global maternal mortality ratio to less than 70 per 100,000 live births. I also wanted to initiate a conversation on the importance of accessibility to equitable healthcare. For the interview portion of my project, I spoke with two healthcare professionals. I first spoke with Ms. Lyko, a nurse in Baltimore. Through this interview, I was able to gain firsthand knowledge on the status of maternal health in the U.S. She shared insight into what mothers can do to protect their own health and the importance of advocating for themselves. I also spoke with Dr. Kriya Perry. She's the president and founder of the National Birth Equity Collaborative. We discussed further systemic racism within the medical community. She said if we want to solve healthcare inequality, we need to stop telling people of color what they need to do to improve their health and start saying what we need to do to undo racism. People believe health is genetic and a choice, but not a right. We need to agree that all people are valuable and health is a right for everyone. My experiential aspect, the Educate Girls Globally Club will be holding an Amazon wishlist fundraiser this spring. It is in support of our 4 fellows we have been working with for the past few years in India. This wish list would include various essentials like school supplies and sanitary napkins. Supporting women's reproductive health and education is essential to improving the maternal mortality rate globally. Lastly, I will share proposed solutions. Care workers will remain the most key aspect for improving maternal health. To reduce maternal mortality, women need access to trained and equipped healthcare workers that are in communities because many women are hesitant to get care due to distance. Healthcare workers are essential in saving lives of both newborns and mothers during pregnancy and birth. Trained medical workers can not only provide care for mothers during childbirth, but also can provide information on sexual and reproductive health, proper nutrition, breastfeeding, and vaccination. Another proposed solution is providing for and supporting community-based health. In 2017, the United Nations Children's Fund created 3,000 midwifery kits and distributed to healthcare facilities across northern South Sudan. Gifts provided many essential items such as folic acid, antimalarial drugs, and oxytocin. Mothers received kits with essentials like soap, new baby clothes, blankets, and a plastic sheet. Many of the women could not afford these products otherwise. Furthermore, UNICEF and the European Union partnered with the government of Sierra Leone to build 23 new hospitals. They have repaired and expanded maternity units and as well as provided basic utilities like running water, hygiene, and sanitation units. Proposed solutions, the United States. Addressing systemic racism in the medical system. As long as systemic racism exists in the medical system, mothers of color will suffer. Healthcare institutions need to recognize healthcare inequality and racial disparities. Finally, I will speak of 2 pieces of legislation. In March 2020, Senator, now Vice President Kamala Harris, Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, and Congresswoman Alma Adams introduced the Black Maternal Health Omnibus Act. This bill aims to prevent maternal deaths as well as address maternal health outcomes among minority populations. Approaches to investing in community health like in this bill, would help benefit minority populations greatly. The Affordable Care Act currently provides health care for millions of women, but also has allowed millions of women to gain access to maternal care, particularly Black women who are often uninsured and would not otherwise receive many health care services that are now available through the Act. Not all change needs to happen on a national level. Communities can invest in their own health through understanding implicit bias, reproductive health education, supporting, and most importantly, creating awareness. Thank you everyone for watching my presentation. Special thanks to Dr. Romine for all her assistance, Ms. Moore, my mentor on this project, Ms. Lyko and Dr. Kriya Perry for letting me interview them, and Dr. Pin for giving me inspiration to pursue this project. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nora Rosario and I'm ready for questions.
Hi, Nora. Ms. Moore here. Wonderful project, very wonderful information that you shared with everyone. My question for you is, Why do you feel that this topic still needs to be educated on in the medical community? Why is this something that we are still, it's been worked on for so long, but why is it still something that we need to educate the masses on? What's missing in the medical community for this to be brought to many people's attention?
Thank you, Ms. Moore, for your question, and thank you for all your help during my project and your mentorship. I think the number one thing, there's just such a lack of awareness of this topic. I mean, thousands of women die each year from inaction, and it's and from ignorance. And I really think there's just a lack of awareness because when you think of maybe maternal health, it's more centered around poorer countries, but it's really so prevalent in our own area. I mean, DC itself has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the country. And I don't think enough people know about that. So that's really the number one goal of my project, was to bring awareness to that fact. I mean, even just week is actually Black Maternal Health Week. So there is hope that people are bringing attention to this, especially with the Black Maternal Momnibus legislation that was introduced in the House. But I mean, there just needs to be awareness for the thousands of mothers who die every year. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Hi, Nora. Thank you so much for your awesome presentation and raising awareness through your work, which is, as you've just said, one of your goals. This obviously is a complex issue, as you've noted, that has many root causes in structural racism, poor access to quality healthcare, need for improved legislation, lack of education, poverty, and then cultural barriers and stigmas. So my question to you is, beyond addressing the direct maternal health and healthcare aspect of the issue, based on your own experiences, your research in the US and abroad, particularly with Educate Girls Globally, what do you think is the greatest priority area in terms of supporting young women as they become prepared to become mothers in order to maximize those protective factors against maternal mortality, and whose responsibility is that? Thank you.
Thank you for your question and all your leadership in EGG this year and help with the drive. I really think in terms of the context of EGG, the number one thing we can do, and it's really the bare minimum, is providing reproductive education to young girls, especially since a lot of the girls that we sponsor through Educate Girls Globally are all child brides, and child brides statistically have poor outcomes when it comes to maternal health. So providing reproductive health education is so important, so they know what's available to them and they know, what steps they can take. I also think I tried to highlight this in my project, community-based health is really important. Not everything can happen on a national level, but communities can really step in and make the outcomes better for their community members. So I think that's really important, providing education, providing items like sanitary products is really the bare minimum and can definitely make a difference. So yeah, thank you for your question.
And thank you, Nora, for a fabulous and important topic. Our next presentation is a STEM capstone project brought to you by Arifa Oola.
12:06, 6 seconds a.m. Case's virus had bored a window through the library's command ice. He found an infinite blue space ranged with color-coded spheres strung on a tight grid of pale blue neon. In the non-space of the matrix, the interior of a given data construct possessed unlimited subjective dimension. Here, this one. He triggered a subprogram that affected certain alterations in core commands. Out now, reversing smoothly the virus reading the fabric of the window. Done. This is an abbreviated passage from Neuromancer, written by William Gibson in 1984. In this particular part, a hacker is stealing information from a research library. In the whole novel, you can see examples of people accessing data, info, and even brains and thoughts. This, in the end of the day, is all fiction. But the thing about good sci-fi and fiction is that there is a bit of truth to it. In my STEM Capstone project, I will be talking about the truth. Hi everyone, my name is Avifa Oola, and my STEM Capstone project is Cybersecurity of Deep Brain Stimulation Devices. Cybersecurity is the study of safety and protection of computers and other electronics. Now that we have that definition, the next question we then have is, what exactly is a deep brain stimulation device? A deep brain stimulation device, or DBS for short, is a medical device implanted into your brain that sends electrical pulses. It contains a battery pack or neurostimulator at the top of your chest and a tiny wire that follows up your neck and into your brain. The wire is then attached to two tiny rods called LEDs. The battery sends the pulses through the wire and all the way to the LEDs to stimulate specific regions of the brain. It either activates or deactivates the region. Though DBS sounds painful and invasive, the procedure is quite the contrary, and many use the device. Chronic Parkinson's patients and people with Parkinsonian-like tremors have used DBS since the late 50s and 60s to minimize tremors of up to 70% or having no tremors at all. Recently, however, as the technology progresses and continues to advance, DBS is used for a wide range of applications, such as to treat depression, schizophrenia, and OCD. Some researchers are even looking into neuroenhancement, which means to increase brain function. DBS is kind of a big deal. 60,000 people each year are diagnosed with Parkinson's, and the global market for DBS is projected to be $1,224 million. The number is expected to rise even higher in 2026. The leading medical companies are Medtronic, Boston Scientific, and St. Jude Medical in America, and Scenic and Beijing Pins in China. Even though these devices have a lot of praise, some professionals and medical experts wonder the safety of these devices. There are now devices in the market that are wireless and can be connected with your phone through an app. It leads to people even wondering if it is possible to tamper with the device in the patient's head and control their actions. There is also the battle between leading countries on who can advance the tech and take over the market, which leads to medical tourism. When you cannot have a procedure done in one country because of either high expenses or because it's simply illegal, you go to another country to get it done. Since not every country's rules and regulations are the same, a patient's biodata can be used for subpar reasons. It gives the other country significant info on the competition, and the safety is perhaps not a priority. Therefore, I reached to this problem statement. Medical companies, as well as government agencies, need methods to ensure safety for DBS users because it's not only a matter of public well-being, but a matter of national security. I divided the year into 3 parts. The first part was me learning how to hack, the second was me studying the devices, and the third was me putting the two together. During the summer, I took an online hacking course to understand the software used in common wireless network hacking methods. Here are some tools and software I studied and practiced with. I focused on accessing wireless networks. I then moved to the devices themselves. I wanted to see if the way the device is made allowed it to be accessed. This is me researching articles and figuring out the machinery involved. I found that medical devices are categorized in complexity, ranging from IIDs and ICDs. DBS specifically are categorized between open and closed loop systems, where closed loop is self-automating. Open loop systems, on the other hand, can communicate with other devices outside the patient body. For a while, I couldn't find much about open loop DBS until I read Boston Scientific's website about their DBS device, where I found detailed descriptions of their products. As you can see, this is the software they use and the products they have. I was hoping to contact Boston Scientific and ask if I could perhaps look into their software. I realized that this may not be possible after looking at time constraints and a few other concerns like patenting of the software. To avoid possible complications, I concluded that the best way to approach this was to compile my findings in a research paper. It would contain all research and interviews I've done so readers can get a sense of the complexity of the topic. Here are some excerpts. Current DBS technology is actually a rapid evolving movement. Each year there are new changes. There are concerns and implications always, but with time, DBS is building credibility. I think one day it would be the first and final solution to many problems. And finally, thank you so much for your time. Please ask any questions that you may have.
Hi, everyone. Like I said, please ask any questions that you may have.
Good morning, Arifa. This is Ms. Miller. First off, I just want to say I'm very proud of you. I know you put a lot of hard work into this project this year, and I'm really grateful that you included me as a questioner. My question for you sort of touches on something you lightly talked about, in that there is some real danger related to deep brain stimulation devices. Was this scary to learn about? And what was the scariest or most dangerous possible outcome that you learned about?
It was definitely shocking to know that there are people out there who would possibly go through the trouble of hacking a device that's meant for good. It wasn't necessarily scary though, because I think we should all be wary of internet, like the internet and smart devices, and DBS devices is just an extension of that. I think the most scariest part would be the medical tourism aspect, because a large foreign group can collect so much data and information from you. It's a real national security issue, and you can think of ways it would play out in the long run. The most dangerous outcome, to answer your second question, I found is devices turning off so that they lose their function. This one example I found though is that what happened by accident. So this man, he walked through airport security and the device turned off because of the strong magnets. And what happened afterwards was that he became mentally unstable and they had to shut off the device and take it out. So I think it can't get any worse than that, because so many groups like the FDA and the FBI and the medical companies themselves work hard in making sure that they're safe.
Scary stuff. Thank you.
Hi, Arifa. First, my question for you is, when you have DBS, how long does it take to see the results? And also, will the person be able to increase or decrease the strength of the stimulation?
So that depends. Typically for Parkinson's, the DBS device turns on remotely by the medical team in 4 weeks after surgery, and then the results are seen 2 months after that. As for increasing and decreasing the strength of the stimulation, it's either automatic, like the device does it itself, or it's adjustable with a handheld device. The more advanced devices that are the ones that the patient and the doctor can adjust outside, those are the ones I showed earlier in my presentation from Boston Scientific. And generally, the strength of the stimulation increases over time since your brain gets used to the lower levels, similar to how people increase their coffee intake to stay awake.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Arifa, for that informative and important presentation. Next, we have a Humanities and Global Studies presentation brought to you by Chase Turner. Enjoy.
Hi, my name is Chase Turner, and the title of my project is Medical Mistrust, African Americans and COVID-19. The main issues of my project are past issues that reflect today's relationship between African Americans and the medical community, how COVID-19 has affected the African American community, and how does COVID affect the African American population's ability to be treated for other medical issues such as the flu or diabetes and stuff on that lines. If we take a couple steps back and talk about the past, there were slavery and the different trials and testing that occurred on slaves that weren't exactly okay. For example, performing labor on African American females without using anesthesia, past medical trials such as the syphilis, overall mistrust in the government that stems from different things depending on who you ask. And to the side, you have an image of an actual person or black man being injected with syphilis when they were told that this was supposed to just see how immune they were. But instead, the exact opposite happened, and nobody was really immune to it. What is implicit bias? Implicit bias is already coming into a situation and saying that this person can do such and such without truly understanding and getting a chance to know the person. And I feel like that really was the overall theme in my project. So I do think that it's not okay for people to come in situations with implicit bias because you never know who the person is and how the person maintains it. Research and findings. So in my project, I used a lot of databases, data charts, and interviews. I conducted 2 interviews with 2 people in the medical community. I used data charts to talk about different things in databases just to make sure that what I was looking up came from a really reliable source. The specific databases that I used were different databases throughout the school library, such as EBSCO, Academic Search for Merit. I did use other things such as the CDC and other medical websites to help get all of my ideas and details through and straight. Right here, you see an example of a data chart that talks about the death ratio between all the different races that you would typically see in America, or the most prominent ones rather. Even though African Americans is lower than Hispanic or Latino percentages, the only difference is population overall. There are less African Americans than there are Hispanic and Latinos in America, so that's pretty much the reason why the numbers are low. But if certain parties weren't as populated, then the numbers would be a little bit higher. My experiential aspect, I was able to teach 2 different classes, one in my Capstone class and another in my kinesiology and rehabilitation class. I use my experience to be able to learn and get feedback from fellow students in order to tweak certain things that I would need to work on in my presentation, so I can bring that back and present it to you all. One of the interviews that I conducted was with Dr. Melina Gould. She is a certified registered nurse anesthetist and the founder of Diversity in CRNA, and her main goal in her job is to promote diversity for young Black nurses and moving forward so that they can have a promising future for themselves. Another interview that I conducted was with a family friend, Dr. Wendell Pearson. He is the physician head of all hospitals in Prince George's County. And with both interviews, I wanted to gain up 2 different perspectives with a couple questions that were on the lines of my project. And so being able to talk with them really helped to see the difference between a civilian perspective and an actual medical official perspective. So the solution that you would find in my project are awareness and more community engagement to gain more trust. And what I mean by that is just being able to both on both sides be more progressive and engaging. Um, I would say kind of like educating people also because that helps with ease 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 the tension between both sides and get people to understand that it's these are things that happened in the past and towards the future it would be easier to develop relationships. I want to thank Ms. Millicent and Dr. Rahman for being able to work with me throughout this entire year and helping me with different things throughout my project. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chase Turner, and I'm open for questions.
Well, hi, Chase. It's such an important topic, and it couldn't be more relevant a topic for today and everything we're all experiencing right now. My question for you is really sort of solution oriented, since there's already an implicit bias against seeking medical care in many minority communities. I wonder if you think this should be best handled at the federal level. You know, should there be a national campaign to address medical mistrust, or would it be better handled at the community level where neighbors and church groups and community advocates go out and talk to people about, you know, being more willing to take, say, for example, get the COVID vaccine or seek medical treatment?
To be honest, I think it's better off on both levels, both national and community based. I say community based because at the end of the day, your community is what's going to convince you to do certain things, both with friends and family, and on a national level to reach all the different people around America. So I definitely think that both options would be feasible in order to gain a pretty good solution.
Thank you. And a second follow-up question I would have, did either one of your interviewees talk about their own experience being minorities in the medical profession, what it meant to be an African-American doctor, for example, if that gave them a particular insight, or if they had a particular experience that led them to be more advocates for reaching out to minority communities?
Yes. So my first interview, which was with Dr. Pearson, he came from the South Side of Chicago, and so that pretty much helped prompt him to move forward in terms of being able to reach African Americans. So coming to Maryland and specifically Prince George's County, with Prince George's County being like the largest African American county in America, he uses his title and his status in order to comfort people, if that makes sense, and being able to be a familiar face. And with Dr. William Gould, with her job being able to inspire people, I definitely think that helps out because there's not a lot of Black nurses, and you don't really see a lot of Black nurses. So being able to inspire people and with the people that she inspires, they inspire others. It's sort of like a trickle down effect, which both sides help out a lot.
Thank you, Chase.
No problem.
Good morning, Chase. I acknowledge all of your tedious work this year. So my first question to you today would be, what made you interested in your project?
Okay, so the first thing that made me interested in my project was I post college I want to be a nurse anesthetist, and so I wanted to do something that was medical based, and I felt as if, like, when I first decided to do this during the time, it was the summer, and with everything that was going on in the world, I thought that both COVID and with police shootings and stuff like that, it would be good to tie all three together. So that's pretty much how I came up with the idea for my topic.
My follow-up question for you today is, what were some major takeaways that you had from your project? And to piggyback on Ms. Mellinson's first question, how could we use the information that you gained to improve this issue?
Major takeaways that I gained from my project were first all the different reasons. Like each and every person has a different reason for why they don't want to take the vaccine. It could just be word of mouth. It could just be rumor based or personal experiences with medicine. So that was a big takeaway for me. Another takeaway was the fact that since I finished my project a bit earlier, this was before people were starting to pick up on taking a vaccine. So it definitely was a bit more impactful during that time. But I still think that we'll be better off bringing it to more people. If for your second question, I think that it's really just educating people, because if you don't know something, then it's not going to benefit you to just go into a situation kind of like with your eyes closed. So I definitely think that just educating people and bringing it forward to everyone else helps out a lot.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you so much, Chase, for that wonderful presentation. It's so important. We definitely need more doctors and nurses in the medical fields. So thank you again. Our next capstone project is a STEM presentation brought to you by Drew Walker.
I'll be showcasing my year-long STEM project based on the flow issue of Lake Okeechobee in southern Florida. My project is basically about the altered flow of Lake Okeechobee in South Florida and how it impacts local estuaries. This is an image of a mass fish kill in the Indian River Lagoon located in St. Lucie County. By the end of my presentation, you will understand how these fish died and hopefully get an understanding of how to solve this issue. My problem statement is stated as followed. People who are unaware of Florida water management issues need a way to learn more about how Florida's waterways can become restored, because we want to secure the health of our water resources, protecting our way of life for future generations. Here's a map for context when I talk about each location in Florida. Located north of Lake Okeechobee is the Kissimmee River, and flowing west of Lake Okeechobee is the Caloosahatchee River. Flowing east is the St. Lucie River. And these arrows depict the flow of Lake Okeechobee in the past, where it once flowed south into the Everglades, but it's not currently. Lake Okeechobee is the largest lake in Florida and currently sheds off into the Caloosahatchee and St. Lucie Rivers, flowing east and west, seen in this image, which is the current flow. Before this flow alteration, Lake Okeechobee would naturally shed off into the Everglades, and that water purify itself on its way to the Everglades. And this depicted in this image, which is the historical flow of Lake Okeechobee. Canals built to protect homes south of Lake Okeechobee divert water east and west into the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee rivers. Poor nutrients and pollution from agriculture stagnate in Lake Okeechobee and drain east and west, causing algae blooms, leading to mass fish kills and dead seagrass. You can see the effects the algae blooms have on each coast in this image. Seagrass provides habitat for juvenile fish in the Everglades estuary, and without it, there would be no oxygen nor shelter for the fish to survive in. Before American settlers changed South Florida's drainage in the early 20th century, the rain that fell in Orlando would gradually drain through the Kissimmee Basin to Okeechobee, where it would be held. Lake Okeechobee would overflow and ultimately replenish the Everglades with fresh water. There is not enough fresh water being poured south into the Everglades, but rather flows east into the St. Lucie River and west into the Caloosahatchee River, hurting seagrass and oyster beds, and scares away game fish along the coast. Fresh water flowing from the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee watersheds causes salinity and water quality problems in their respective estuaries. To make it clear, the Everglades is not the only body of water being affected by the flow of Lake Okeechobee, but as well as the Caloosahatchee and St. Lucie regions. The Everglades Agriculture Area, short for the EAA Reservoir, is a solution to combat the flow of Lake Okeechobee. This project will significantly reduce harmful Lake Okeechobee discharges to the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee rivers by storing and cleaning excess water from the lake before sending it south to the Everglades, where it once flowed naturally and where it's needed most. The reservoir is on this image, lined in orange, and is located south of Lake Okeechobee. The South Florida Water Management District, short for the SFWMD, began blasting ground to make way for the canals that funnel water into the 6,500-acre stormwater treatment area, the STA, which is a component of the EAA reservoir. The stormwater treatment area design includes filtered marshes that will naturally cleanse the water before it flows south to the Everglades. As you can see on the picture on the left, the Everglades Agriculture Area Reservoir is located south of Lake Okeechobee, so it could filter the fresh water before sending it south. This project started on August 28th of 2020 and should be completed by 2023. At the beginning of my project, or the low fidelity phase, I worked with QGIS, which is a software that allows you to locate a specific location on a map and 3D print it. In this image, I'm working with QGIS and developing a 3D compatible file in order to print. At first, it was difficult to navigate through the software, but the more I worked with it, it became more familiar. I printed out my first prototype, seen in this image, and it came out successfully, but there was not enough exaggeration or contour because Florida is a very flat state with little to no contour. Then midway through my project, I switched gears, and instead of using the 3D printer, I was using the CNC machine. This allowed me to design a larger model, and in the end, I realized that no matter how much contour I added, the model would still look flat due to the lack of hills and mountains in the state of Florida. I was not able to come up with any design with the CNC machine, and that is why I don't have any image depicting my work on the slide. For the last stretch of my project, I decided to create a totally different model that would encapsulate the purpose of my design. I wanted to create a flow model to show how Lake Okeechobee overflows and pollutes each coast of Florida. My model would include a cutout of Florida, seen here, along with a water pump in Lake Okeechobee, which would be placed under this hole in the cutout of the map, which is Lake Okeechobee, and would propel water to each coast. To represent the nutrients in solution and pollutants, I used green food dye. Here's a short clip of my model in action. So the purpose of this model is to demonstrate how the toxic nutrients and pollutants from Lake Okeechobee being poured into each coast cause algae blooms. Lake Okeechobee, prior to the flow issue, would overflow from rain and pour south into the Everglades, providing adequate amounts of fresh water. Our goal is to make Lake Okeechobee push fresh water south into the Everglades where it belongs. I've noticed that not much attention has been given to this issue, so I decided to give it spotlight, which it deserves, because if nothing is done to fix the flow of Lake Okeechobee, the Everglades could be in danger, as well as the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee rivers. As you can see on this image on the left, the Everglades is a unique and pristine area, and we want to keep it healthy and thriving for other generations to experience. Here are my resources that I used throughout the entirety of my project. Thank you, and I hope you learned a thing or two about the issues surrounding Lake Okeechobee's water flow and how it could be combated. I am now open for questions.
My question is, does Lake Okeechobee's current water flow have an effect on the economy of Florida?
Yeah, so these releases from Lake Okeechobee are not only damaging the ecosystems, but is as well affecting the economy. And revenues from tourism are now at risk due to the unsightly water and stench of wildlife remains. Also, the algae blooms on the west and east coast of Florida impose health hazards on locals and tourists. So now people are selling and leaving their homes.
Thank you.
Hey, Drew, I also had a question for you. What inspired you to research Lake Okeechobee's water mismanagement issues?
Yeah, so I first heard of this issue on the news, but I haven't seen it appear publicly since. And there's not a lot of attention being given towards this issue, and every voice counts in order to spread awareness, because currently the Everglades is decimating and needs help to recover it back to its original state. And the solution is known, but it has been delayed for decades due to a lack of political will and public awareness, which I highlighted in my project. So I am using my voice to spread the word across in a sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. It's good to know that people are looking out for the waters of Florida and all the life that depends on that. Our last and final project of session 5 is a Humanities and Global Studies project brought to you by Bailey Walker.
This was me, a high school student struggling in her Algebra 1 math class. While in this class and in many of my other classes, I constantly struggled with paying attention to what my teacher was saying. My mind often drifted to random things like, I pray we're not running heels at practice today, and hopefully I could convince Mom to get Chick-fil-A for
5 minutes left.
I knew the material. Majority of the time. I just got easily distracted and often confused myself when completing assignments. I struggled with paying attention to all the directions listed in assignments, and I even found myself zoning out when people were speaking to me. My parents thought that I was just being lazy and not putting enough effort towards school, but it turns out that that was not the case. I would eventually find out that my daily problems were consistent with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, the inattentive type. The National Center for Learning Disabilities reports that about 1 in 5 children in the United States suffer from a learning and attention issue, including dyslexia and ADHD. And as a result of this issue, many families in the United States are unaware of the various learning disabilities and disorders, as well as how it can affect someone's learning ability and the proper ways to seek help for these issues. In my case, my parents were not very educated on what learning disabilities were. Hence why they believed that I was just being lazy with my work and performing poorly on tests and quizzes. So when my teacher recommended that I look into getting tested for learning accommodations, my parents were clueless on how to follow up with my teacher's remarks. It was new to all of us. By the summer of 2020, I had been tested and diagnosed with the inattentive type of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, thanks to the assistance of various teachers and staff members at Bullis, to include Mr. Moreau and Mr. Ice. With their involvement in my education, I was able to receive the assistance I needed to be successful in a classroom setting, and because of how my own experience went, I decided to focus my Humanities Capstone project on the process of gaining learning accommodations. This year, I have worked with my mentor and one of our school learning specialists, Dr. Susan Holtzman, to gain a basic understanding of the world of learning disabilities and ADHD. While working with her this year, I have done heavy research focused on what are learning disabilities and ADHD, the signs of a student with learning disabilities and ADHD, the differences between public and private schools' education requirements, the cost associated with getting tested for students, the effectiveness of student service plans, and much more. Furthermore, I was able to conduct an interview with Dr. Lori Smith, a licensed private practice psychologist who worked in Fairfax County Education System for over 16 years. She was able to educate me on the complications involved in getting tested, as well as the testing process of learning accommodations, which gave me a better insight into the work that I am doing today. To shed light on my capstone project, I shared a general presentation with my Humanities and Global Studies class. In this class, I taught a lesson focusing on what ways our community can best support students with learning disabilities and attention deficit hyperactivity disorders, in addition to what ways we can improve awareness of students with learning disabilities and ADHD. To add on, in March of this year, I appeared on the Dig Deep segment of the Bullis SGA Rise Up show to share with the entire Bullis community my own personal challenges with getting tested and getting accommodations implemented in my school life. So what now, you may ask? Reflect on my story. Do you think you suffer from a learning disability or ADHD? Do you think you know someone who suffers from a learning disability or ADHD? I ask all students, parents, faculty, and extended members of the Bullis community to raise your awareness of learning disabilities and ADHD. If not for you, do it for the person who may not know of psychological disorders and resources available to them. Be that teacher, friend, or trusted adult who helped a student like me, a student in need. You never know how it could turn out. The least you can do is try. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Bailey Walker, and I am now open for questions.
Bailey, thank you for inviting me to your presentation. I really enjoy seeing how after you learn about your own ADHD, you decided to educate yourself. It's a bit like you suddenly discover that a major software has been running for a long time in the background of your brains and shaping all sorts of outcome in your life. And now that the program has been exposed, you're trying to understand how it runs and especially how it alters your own goal. I think that's very powerful, Billy, very empowering. I have two questions for you. After learning about your ADHD and how it affects your daily routine, have you made any adjustment to some of the activities, your daily activity to improve your efficiency? Have you tried to hack the software in some ways? That's the first question. And the second is there anything that we teacher could have done in the classroom that would have made your learning more efficient? What recommendation do you have for us? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. To answer the first one, once I was informed of my learning challenge, I cannot say that it specifically impacted my daily routine, so to speak, but it was more of a sign of relief that something was wrong and I wasn't crazy. My family, as well as my support system at Bullis, worked with me to plan out my daily activities and to stay on track with my daily requirements at home as well as at school. And everyone was just there to assist me as well as I needed to make sure that I was okay. To answer your second question, honestly, I don't think that any teachers could have done anything to change my experience altogether. All of my teachers, even prior to my accommodations being put in place, were extremely understanding of what type of learner I was. And they were always there to make sure that I was successful in the classroom. The only recommendation that I can give to the Bullis community as a whole would be to make sure that we put an effort to make sure that a student in need receives the guidance and the assistance that they need as best as possible.
Thank you.
Hi, Bailey. Congratulations. You did such a great job on your presentation, and I've really enjoyed working with you this year. My question is for you to the students who are listening to this who may be thinking they have a learning difference, like a learning disability, like a dyslexia or ADHD. I wonder if you can tell them a little bit about what it was like to get tested. What happened? What kinds of activities did you do? Did it hurt? What is it like to get tested for learning differences?
Thank you, Dr. Holtzman, for being one of my questionnaires today. The entire process of getting tested was not easy whatsoever, but with the help of various staff members and faculty at Bullis, to include Mr. Ice, I was able to test for learning accommodations this summer, in which it was an easy process once I got there, and it was more of a written, just motor skills sort of test to see where I was at mentally, and after that, it was an easy process in which the psychologist wrote up some findings that she had. She also asked about things at my home. What was that like? Did my parents have any issues in growing up as well in terms of their education? So after that, it was really a straightforward process once I got tested.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of session 5 for the Signature Program Symposium. And we'd like to thank all of our presenters, all of our question askers, and certainly all of you out there watching. And we hope that as you see these students around campus, you might ask them a little bit more deeply to explain some of their project if something stood out to you today. So thank you all again and have a wonderful day.